Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is the final installment of my three-part series about Jane Austen's male characters. If you missed them, my first two videos in this series covered all of the main male characters in Austen's books except for Emma. Today we're going to tackle Mr. Knightley as featured in Emma. And I'm going to follow that up with a more general discussion about how Austen wrote the men in her novels and the strengths and weaknesses and the ways in which she wrote them and how we perceive them nowadays. And so keep watching until the end and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. So without further ado, let's get into it. So finally, let's talk about Emma and Mr. Knightley. And I love Mr. Knightley as a person. Like, he's one of my favorite Austen heroes. And I actually really love the development of the love story between him and Emma. I love friends to lovers. That's one of my favorite tropes. And this was like the OG of friends to lovers. And I love how it dawns on Emma that she loves Mr. Knightley, and she has for a long time, but she's just not aware of it. I think that happens a lot when friends become something more. Like, I've observed it happening before. Like, you cross that bridge without having realized that you crossed it, right? But let's talk about Mr. Knightley and the things that people don't like about him. There's two complaints. One, that he's so much older than Emma, and that gives people a little bit of ick, which, okay, that's valid. And the other is that, kind of like Henry Tilney with Catherine Morland, he is put in a position of scolding Emma and kind of correcting her because she is so much younger than him. So those two things are kind of intertwined. First of all, age difference is I think, and always has been, like, something that people are like, like, even when it happened commonly, like, it was not uncommon at all historically for older men to be married to younger women because for a variety of factors and a variety of reasons. And most of the time, though, those were arranged marriages. They weren't love matches. So I think that's what is a little bit different here, the fact that they are falling in love in spite of the age difference. But it's not like Mr. Knightley is a doddering old man and she's like a little young teenager, you know, or really young. It's not like that. She is in her early 20s, I think, or 19, 20, 21. I don't know, somewhere along those lines. I don't actually know how old she is, but he's in his 30s, I believe. And there's a similar age difference between Colonel Brandon and Marianne, in which people complain about as well, in Sense and Sensibility. And I think that one, like, you may not even be super aware of it, but there is one point in the story where Mr. Knightley says something about, I think he was like 14 years old or something when Emma was born, or when she was very young, and he remembers holding her as a baby. And I think that some people are like, ew, like, that just gives them a little bit of ick. And I think it's the fact that they knew each other then, because if he had just like moved into the area when she was already grown, it wouldn't be as big of a deal that he was that much older than her, because they're still both fully grown adults and they're still in the same general bracket of adulthood, right? He's not in old age or even middle age yet. Like, they're still compatible age-wise. On the outside edge of that, right? But still within that bracket. I think it's the fact that he knew her that whole time and was so much older than her and literally watched her grow. And so I think that that is part of what gives people a little bit of the ick factor, that, okay, this is just, you know, you don't really like that. I think it's saved by the fact that, I don't think he was aware of his feelings. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I reread Emma, but I don't think he's fully aware of it until the course of the story that Austen is telling, like this time period when he's already fully grown and she is also fully grown and fully adult. She's not like a young teenager sort of thing anymore. He doesn't realize it until then. But even more importantly, he does not act on it at all. In fact, he goes and talks to his brother about it because he doesn't want to make a move. He doesn't want to assume anything about Emma's feelings for him, and he doesn't think that she would fall in love with him, like, with the age difference and everything. But he doesn't know, and Emma is just beginning to learn about herself, is that she actually has indeed fallen in love with him. So I think the way that it works out in the story, it doesn't actually bother me. There are some stories when there's a huge age difference between the characters it gives me pause. It's definitely one of the things that is like, I don't love it. Like, it's not ideal. But at the same time, it does happen. And I know relationships where the couples have greater than 10 years difference between them and they're very happily married, and it definitely can work. I think the biggest thing is that makes it work for me is that it's not like Mr. Knightley was pursuing Emma when he was, say, 25 and she was 11. You know, he wasn't grooming her. Oh heavens, that would be terrible. That would be disgusting. But that didn't happen. Like, he just saw her as, you know, the neighbor girl until the point where she was fully grown. And again, I think for him, just like for Emma, like, there's that point where it crossed from being good friends and just knowing each other really well because they were neighbors and they spent a lot of time together. That point where they crossed into having these romantic feelings for each other, and they didn't even know when they crossed it. So it's not like he was actively pursuing her from the cradle, right? So that saves it from being gross for me personally. I don't see it as gross. But at the same time, I can understand how people can have that perspective of Mr. Knightley just because of the bare facts of the story, right? And as for his, you know, he scolds Emma a few times in the story, and he corrects her, and he stands up to her. But I don't personally have a problem with that because everybody knows Emma can be an annoying person, right? She needs someone to say, you shouldn't have said that. She needs someone to be like that in her life because she doesn't have, I mean, she grows in this way in the story. She becomes more aware of how she is treating other people and her perspective and what she said. Anyway, she becomes more self-aware as the story goes on as part of her development. But part of that is Mr. Knightley pointing it out to her, and she needs that. And that's part of what makes them such good friends because, like, he is a faithful friend to her who is able to say, you should not have said that. Like, listen, Mrs. Bates is, you know, all of the reasons why you should treat Mrs. Bates respectfully, and you're not. And he points out the flaws in her character and how she has dealt with him. He points out the flaws in her perception of the situation with Harriet and with Frank Churchill and with Jane Fairfax. And he has insight that Emma doesn't have because Emma is too self-absorbed. She's self-absorbed, but not self-aware, which very often goes together, right? So anyway, Emma needs that. Emma needs someone. And some people say that, you know, makes it like a father-daughter figure. I don't see that. I see it as more like friend. It's part of their friend relationship that they have where they're close enough and they know each other so well that he is the one who can say to her, Emma, what are you doing? Like, you know better. You should not be saying that. You should not be doing that. I think that it works for them. Now, I have seen relationships where, I said that I've seen relationships with 10 years difference that worked. I've seen ones that don't work, where the girl marries essentially like a father figure, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. So there can be dangerous signs there. So again, I understand when people say that and point it out as a flaw, but at the same time, I don't see it in that way. I see it as Mr. Knightley being a friend who's so close to Emma, they have such a good relationship that it can withstand him saying to her, look, Emma, you're wrong here and you need to fix it. So I think all of us need a good friend like that. And I think that in a marriage relationship, I think that both partners should be able to say that to each other, because we know each other more intimately than any other relationship, right? So there should be that freedom to be able to say to each other, hey, your insight is off here. You shouldn't have said that to someone. I know, how many of us do we like I know I've done this. Like I've had my husband read emails before I send them, for example, because I want another perspective to help me know if I'm doing the right thing or not. I run scenarios by him and, you know, did I do the right thing or what is the right thing to do? And vice versa. Like, it goes both ways. So I think that I don't personally see red flags there based on my reading of the story, but at the same time, I can understand people do. To sum up, just some generalizations I think that we have to bear in mind when reading Austen and reading about these these men and their issues or whatever. Two things in particular that come to mind. If there's a flaw in her writing, this is a flaw, okay? Yeah, you heard it. You heard it. Anne said that Jane Austen had a flaw in her writing. You heard it here first. Anyway, if there's a flaw in her writing, it's that we don't get to see the character development in the male characters hardly at all. Mr. Darcy, we see the most, but even his is told in retrospect. Most of them, that's what happens. Edward Ferrars tells Eleanor in retrospect, like the development of his feelings. Like we don't see it happening in real time. We have to take their word for it that there was character development and change along the way. Mr. Darcy, we see some of it. Captain Wentworth, like we don't get to experience much of it because it happens, you know, so close to the end of the story, and we don't really get to see too much of his character development. And Mr. Tilly, there's not really a lot. Like he's a pretty static character. There's not any big flaws that he has to overcome per se. And same with Mr. Knightley. Edmund, again, we get his retrospective view on how things took place. And even though we don't get a lot, I remember the last time I read Mansfield Park thinking that Jane Austen just mentioned in passing that Edmund and Fanny like discussed everything sitting in a garden in the park at their estate at Mansfield Park. And, you know, they talked about everything. And it was like, okay, but can't we hear that conversation? Like, you know, I'd love to hear what they talked about. Like, that'd be fantastic. We don't get a spotlight on their character development. We don't get to spend a lot of time with them. We don't get to know much about their inner thoughts and lives, which is why I really love retellings that focus on the male character and fill in those details, because that is missing, admittedly, from Austen's books. So we have to take her word for it, basically, that there has been development in these men's lives, that the flaws that they have that have been pointed out have been overcome, they've changed, they've grown, and now they are worthy of her female characters in this story. So we kind of have to take her word for it. We don't really get to see it in action happening. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I feel like this is even more important, I think Austen's strength, so I pointed out, you know, there's a weakness here, but I think her strength is in the way that she portrays people honestly, with complexity in all of their flaws and weaknesses, but also their strengths and their goodnesses. And I think that none of her male characters is a perfect guy, but I wonder why that's a problem for some people, because they're real. I've known a few guys in my life, like, you know, met them, interacted with them, observed them, and all of the characteristics that she presents in her stories are very, very real. Are there the Edmund Bertrams who are distracted by a pretty face and a charming personality, and they don't see the perhaps slightly mousy but wonderful young lady right there, adoring them this whole time? Absolutely. Have I seen it happen in my life? Yes, I have observed it happening more than once. Men are very easily distracted. I mean, let's just be honest. They're very easily distracted by a pretty face and a charming personality. I mean, look at Mr. Bennet, what he ended up with, right? Like, realistically, this happens all the time, right? Thank goodness Edmund was able to pull himself up short before it was too late, but that doesn't happen for everybody. So kudos to him for realizing it. Like, that's good. What about Edward Ferrars, for example? Do people have emotional relationships whereby they are essentially cheating on someone? Yes. And I think that any single one of us is susceptible to that. And we can talk ourselves into all kinds of things and justifying all kinds of things. Like, it's perfectly normal. And I think, and it happens a lot. Like, it's perfectly normal. It's not good. I'm not trying to say it's good. I'm just saying Austen is writing about real men and women with real character flaws and real strengths and actual things that happen in life, and she's exploring it, and she's exploring the fallout from it, and she's exploring how you can overcome it you know, how can it be overcome? I think that's what makes her books so enduring and timeless, because of that very quality. These are not heroic fairy tale prince characters. They're just not. They are everyday men that we meet in real life and that we know in real life and that we marry. They're just normal guys and with normal issues that they have to overcome in a normal way, and having relationships with very normal women who are also flawed. So I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I see Austen's books as an exploration of human character and exploring what is good about it and what is bad about it, and the things that we do that are stupid, men and women, and how it can be overcome, how we can forgive one another and move on from certain things, and how we can change and grow. And I think that is ultimately one of the biggest strengths in her book. So the fact that her male characters are not perfect fairy tale princes, to me, is actually one of the strengths of her books and one of the things that I really enjoy about them. Even if other people sometimes see it as a flaw, I don't disagree that there are flaws in the characters, but I think ultimately that's a strength of her writing, is that they're flawed characters. So if you have stuck around this long, leave me an emoji in the comments, like a crown or like a prince. There's like a crown or a prince. Leave that in the comments, or something, the equivalent thereof, closest you can get. And then let me know in the comments what you think, what you think about Austen's heroes, if you like them or dislike them or not. When I said I would rank them, okay, so let's do this really quick. Mr. Darcy's at the top, of course, right? Mr. Knightley is very, very, very close to Mr. Darcy. Now, which is funny because I'm not the kind of person who enjoys someone correcting me and telling me what to do. I have a very independent personality, and that's not my favorite thing. But somehow I just really love Mr. Knightley and Emma's relationship. I think they're wonderful. So Mr. Darcy, Mr. Knightley, and then I think you can throw Mr. Bingley in there, because I really love Mr. Bingley, is a very easygoing and fun-loving person. Let's see who we got left. Edward Ferrars and Captain Wentworth, probably about the same level. We can put Colonel Brandon in there, maybe next, and then Henry Tilney. Am I forgetting anybody? Edmund, where would I put Edmund? He'd probably go slightly above Edward Ferrars. For myself personally, because I just like how caring he is. Yeah. So he would go further up there. I actually feel like my husband is a little bit of a mix of Mr. Bingley and Edmund Bertram, because he is a very, very caring person, like Edmund Bertram, but also he's a very friendly, outgoing, cheerful kind of person most of the time, like Mr. Bingley. So he's kind of like a bit of a combination of those two things. So yeah, that's where I would rank them. That's how I'd rank their heroes. Not necessarily for how I would like them personally for myself, but how I like them in the stories. That's how I would rank them. So how would you rank her heroes? Let me know in the comments as well. And I will see you next time. I hope you have enjoyed this little mini series with just my kind of rambling thoughts about the male characters in Austen's stories. And it's not really an analysis of them, mostly a defense of them, because some of them get a lot of flack for a variety of reasons. And while I acknowledge that's definitely valid, at the same time, as I mentioned in the first video, I really like to see them how Austen wrote them, and to give them the same benefit of the doubt that she gives to them, and also kind of read between the lines of what she did not include in her stories. But it's perfectly understandable if a reader is a little more critical about the men in Austen's stories. I can totally get that, especially when we're used to a different way of portraying them in modern literature, or literature since the time of Austen. But at any rate, thank you for joining me in this discussion, and I am really looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts in the comments about how you feel about Austen's men in general and the way she wrote them, and which ones are your favorite. How would you rank them? Which one would be first? Which one would be last? How do they stack up in the middle? I want to hear all of your thoughts. I look forward to discussing it with you in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye.